Procreation. 1. Creation. 1 August, Monday. Had a flash of insight today. Had been mulling over Gott's Harvard notion that the universe contains just one magnetic monopole, because that's its seed, the same way each raindrop holds just one dust particle. Means the guys at Berkeley and U of Houston are wrong about catching them in their balloon over Nebraska, of course. Why not make one in the accelerator? Because you can't move anything that heavy. Monopoles should be 10 billion times, or so, the mass of a hydrogen atom. Flash of insight. To make industrial diamonds, you get the pressure with an explosion. Why not use an electrical discharge? Had some time on the accelerator, tried it. Nothing. Shot electrons at nothing to see if they were attracted or repelled. Got electrons, a few positrons. Probably equipment glitch. 2 August, Tuesday. Anomaly in target. Took it out of accelerator, washed it, scrubbed with pumice, etc. Still no good. Put it under scope. Dark spot of water and cleanser that won't wipe off. Heavy stuff seems to be settling out. 3 August, Wednesday. Told Sis, Martha, how'd you like to say, my brother, husband, the Nobel laureate? Martha, Jean, you're crazy. Heard you talk before, etc. Sis, interested. What I expected from both, in other words. Told her about it. Found monopole, made microverse. Got right. Drove to lab. The microverse seems pyramidal. Strange. Tilted it. Water flowed as by gravity, leaving some solids dry. Gravity interuniversal. Wanted to phone John Kramer about it, but he's off gas professoring in West Berlin. Had to lecture, didn't get much done. 4 August, Thursday. Rigged up light and lab so I can switch it on to study microverse. It's no longer pyramidal, cubical now and bigger. Which only means it's gone from 4 angles to 8. No doubt it'll continue until it approximates a sphere, if I let it. Funny to think how I've written about this odd particle or that, like the monopole, existing in some strange corner of the universe, without guessing it might be true. Special properties at corners? Anyway, it seems no matter how big it gets, it takes up no room, not being in our universe at all. When I measure the target with calipers, it's the right size still. But ruler enters the microverse and loses a little length, making it appear the target has grown. N.B. Remember to write on concept of room for Physical Review C. 5 August, Friday. Introduced cellular material, scrapings from the apple Sis put in my lunch. Astounding results. Green matter spread over all inorganic stuff above water. That's been growing itself, I think. It seems to be expanding with the microverse, though not as fast. Went over to biology and bummed tissue samples from rabbits, mice, and so forth, and put them in. Nothing. They seem to have died. 6 August, Saturday. It seems I was wrong about the animal tissue. Today I saw a couple of little things darting around and 1 or 2 swimming. They seem large for microorganisms. Wanted to catch some and bring them back, but they were too fast for me. What's more surprising, the vegetable matter has turned itself into club moss, or something of the kind. With my good glass, I can even see spore pods hanging from the branches. Fascinating. Wanted to do the animal tissue thing again, but had tossed out the cultures. Scraped my wrist and put the scrapings in. They grew too. Caught the little critter before he got too lively and scraped him, put him back. Soon running around as good as ever, and the tissue I had taken from him became another, much the same. 7 August, Sunday. Decided not to go to the campus today, though I knew it would mean, as it did, Martha would nag me about church. Slept late, watched baseball on TV. Got to talking about the microverse with Sis, and she wanted to tell the people about us. Silly, but she was so fired up I couldn't refuse to help her. She made little drawings on a sheet of paper so it could be folded to make a booklet, beginning with the arc discharge and ending with me watching the Yankees drop one to the Angels. We went over to the campus and reduced it half a dozen times on the good copier, and she folded it up. Maybe I shouldn't say it here, but I don't think I've ever felt prouder in my life than when I showed her the microverse. She was that thrilled. She's already talking about putting in a few cells of her own. But when I used the glass myself, why, horrors! The critters were eating the spore pods, or whatever they are. I want to have a better look at those, so I began casting about for a way of scaring them off. There was a fruit fly circling the apple core in my wastebasket, and I caught it and put it in. It worked like a charm, and off they scampered. Sis said we ought to title her book, but we couldn't think of anything appropriate. After a lot of talk, we just wrote our names, Jean and Sis, on the cover and dropped it in. 2. Recreation. 1 September, Thursday. Completed turnover of the new universe to the astronomy department today. As I told Dr. Ramakrishna, we will eventually have to draw some sort of line between their claims to new universes and ours. Anyway, it certainly appears that gene-eration, as I've christened it, has moved into theirs. They say it's already outside the orbit of Pluto and headed in the direction of Vega. There's a red shift, too. Dr. Ramakrishna suggested it be called Ramajeta. I treated that as a joke, and intended to continue to do so. Now back to work on my article for Physical Review C. 2 September, Friday. Received a most disturbing airmail letter from Dr. Kramer in West Germany. He points out that if my experiment created only a single monopole, then it created a net magnetic charge, which he calls a no-no. He's always kidding. But about this? To paraphrase Kramer, if gene-eration was seeded by a north monopole, then there must also be a south monopole floating around somewhere. And that must have seeded another universe. Call it cis-eration, after Cis, who was my sounding board for the first one. That's particularly apt because Cis is a simple palindrome, read backward the same as forward, and Kramer actually goes so far as to suggest that time might run backward in cis-eration, so that it was destroyed at the moment gene-eration was created. If Kramer's right, cis-eration obviously doesn't grow as fast as gene-eration, which may make it even more valuable. I'll have a good look for it tomorrow. 3 September, Saturday. No classes today, so I was able to go over the lab with a fine-tooth comb looking for cis-eration. Started with the accelerator target, where I found gene-eration, and worked out from there. Nothing. But see here, there's only one monopole in our universe. After all, I've proved that Gott, Harvard, was right about it being the seat of our universe. So it is a net magnetic charge, so far as our universe is concerned. Aha, Kramer, I've got you. Cis-eration is mythical, the Atlantis of physics. 4 September, Sunday. No reason to go to the campus today, so I didn't. Went to church with Martha and got to musing during the sermon. Don't know what to call it, a waking dream. Anyway, while I was sitting there studying the grain in the oak pew in front of me, I remembered that yesterday while I was shaving I had a vision. It started with one of those little vagrant spots that cross my eye sometimes. I think the biologists call them floaters and say they're single-body cells. Anyway, the thing was right in the middle of my eye when I was trying to scrape that tough bit under my nose. It interfered with my vision, and somehow, I suppose because I unconsciously linked not seeing with darkness, I wanted more light. Then it happened. I saw what Ramakrishna and his gang call the Big Bang. I saw that primordial supersun the old philosophers called the eye-limb, saw it open like a milkweed pod and scatter the galaxies. And then it was gone. But here's the part that scares me. I swear I've never thought about that vision from yesterday morning until I was sitting in church today. My subconscious must have decided it was irrational and blocked it out completely. God, what a frightening thought. If I've got a censorship mechanism like that, what else have I lost because of it? 5 September, Monday. Spent most of my day musing at my desk, I'm afraid, replaying the vision of Saturday morning in my memory. The way the Ilem acted and why it acted like that. It's always been assumed that matter and antimatter were created in equal amounts. Parity seems to require it. And it's also been assumed that when an atom met an anti-atom, they returned to energy again. Therefore, there was some kind of segregation principle at work that put all the matter to the right, let's say, and all the antimatter to the left. Because if they were mixed together, they'd eliminate each other perfectly. But that segregation principle is a violation of parity itself. It's God's, or Maxwell's demon, or some such, looking at each little atom and saying, "You sit in smoking, you in non-smoking, you in smoking," and so on. But suppose it wasn't really like that at all. Suppose those atoms were much more stable than we think. Two atoms meet, and each has a dense, high-energy core of protons, or antiprotons, and neutrons. But far outside those cores, each has the classical valence shells of electrons, or positrons, stuff that's much more diffuse, and has much less mass, and consequently much less energy. Now suppose that only those outer electron shells react. The atoms bounce violently apart, and deprived of their outer shells, decay to simpler elements. But of course, when an atom meets another of the same matter, there's no bounce. Do the atoms tend to segregate themselves? You bet. What's more, here's an explanation for one of the oldest mysteries of astrophysics. Why is there so much hydrogen and so little of anything else? 6 September, Tuesday. Ramakrishna called to tell me that gene erasure, that's what he called it, has shifted into the infrared. I thought, okay, if you're a nice guy, I'm a nice guy. So I said, "Dr. Ramakrishna, I want you to stop thinking about the Big Bang. Think about the Big Blossom instead. Think of that primeval fireball unfolding and scattering out stuff that slowly picks up speed." He wanted to call me a damn fool politely, but his English isn't good enough. I told him, "Trust me," and hung up. Wonder if anybody's gotten a Nobel for physics twice. N.B. Look it up. 7 September, Wednesday. It's only 6 a.m., and I don't usually write this journal so early, but I can't sleep. Last evening, as I was getting ready to go to bed, I remembered... No, I can't write it. Suppose somebody, Martha, finds this. I'd be locked away. Remembered something, a visit to Ciceration. I couldn't possibly have forgotten, but I've never remembered before. My God, the continents rising from the water like whales. Kramer's right. I just didn't understand him. It was created when I performed my experiment, and it's propagating through our past. What will it do to us? Got to talk this over with Sis. But I can't. What if I'm really crazy? 3. The Sister's Account. My brother and I were never ordinary children. We shared a secret, though it was not until we were both nearly grown that we understood just how extraordinary a secret it was. TV assured us that other children were transported to strange places, Dorothy to Oz, Wendy and her brothers to Never Never Land. Why then shouldn't Jean and I find ourselves in a place equally strange, though somewhat less interesting? The first time we were on a camping trip, and because we were a few hundred miles from home, we believed for a long time afterward that unless we left home, it wouldn't happen at all. And yet that first time was not terribly interesting, and only a little frightening. We were camping in the Sierras. Mom and Dad were setting up the tent, and Bark was superintending the job from the vantage of a fallen log. We were given a water can and told where the spring was. It wasn't. We stood shivering in country of brown sand and tan and red stones. The towering Sierras were gone, but pinnacles of stone that seemed very high to us, as high, that is to say, as large trees, cast shadows that stretched for miles across the sand. Dark though the sky was, it was not dark with cloud, and no bird flew there. It seemed to us that we walked forever. No doubt it was really 3 miles or so. Then there was a beach where glassy waves raised by the cold, thin wind crashed on the sand, sweeping it forward and back, as I had swept the floor the year before in kindergarten, when I was too young to know that the broom had to be lifted after each stroke. "Look!" I called to Jean. "There they are!" And I could see the tent quite clearly in the lifted surface of every wave, with Dad coming out of it and Bark yapping under his feet, just as if I were seeing the same picture again and again in the TVs in a department store. I ran forward. Dad picked me up, and a minute later Jean was there too. We told Mom and Dad all about it, of course. Mom decided there was a little patch of desert nearby. Dad said that was completely impossible, as of course it was. He took us to the spring, and we found our footprints in the soft soil near the water. But all the footprints pointed away from the tent, as though we had walked into the spring and swum into the earth. Dad was something of a woodsman, and he was frightened by that. He frightened us, too, by making us promise not to tell Mom. After that, we never told anyone. The second time we were at the beach raiding the tide pools for our high school biology class. The waves reminded me of that first experience, but there had been a storm far out in the Pacific, and they were dark and opaquely green. We had not talked about the desert for a long time, but I called Gene over and asked if he couldn't see something. Trees, it seemed to me, beyond the bottom of the pool I'd found. It was just such a forest as you see in the pictures in old books, the trees 10 feet across, wrapped in moss, each sleeping in its own wisp of night. A door opened in the 10th we passed, and a dark man led us down into his underground home, where his shy and lovely wife nursed their child. The man and woman fed us nuts and mushrooms, the boiled fiddleheads of ferns, and bread made without wheat. They talked to us with many gestures and drew pictures of trees and deer on paper that was white again each time the dark man turned it over. We understood very little of what they said, but now I think they were trying to explain that they lived beneath the ground, so that the trees and the deer, who could not, might live above it, and that there were many, many such families. At last the child fell asleep, and the dark woman opened a crumpled little mirror for us, so it was as large and smooth as a pier glass. In it we saw ourselves, and beyond ourselves the ocean, and in a moment its spray was in our faces. Jean and I talked about it for a long time that night, and we decided, or rather he decided, that there was too much danger. We had been lucky thus far, but we could not hope to be lucky always. We thought we had seen 2 different worlds. Perhaps we had. After that, he tried to forget, and I believe he succeeded. I went only once more, when Jean had married, and it was clear I never would. I stood before the vanity in my bedroom and looked beyond my reflected face and saw the sea. At first, I thought it the same world we had visited when we were children, because it was a landscape of stones and dust. But now the sun was hot, and there was kelp on the beach and 1,000 tiny crabs. I sat on a boulder for a while, thinking and looking out at the water, never seeing a sail or a gull. And I understood as I sat there that all 3 had been one world, and that in my own short life I had seen its senility and its flower, and now I saw its beginning. I had carried a mirror with me, having learned something at least from the beautiful dark woman who had been so much younger than I now was. But there was no need of it. The shore held many pools, and each showed me my bed, the coverlet neatly spread for the repose of my rag doll. Beyond it, my closet door stood open, with tiny silverfish swimming among my coats and dresses. I reached for one, but in my hand it became a wisp of embroidered scarf. This afternoon I found a letter on Gene's desk from his friend, Dr. Kramer, who is teaching for a year in West Germany. It said, "Congratulations on your creation of the monopole. But I have a slight quibble. You didn't mention it, but you must surely have made a pair, a north monopole and a south monopole. Otherwise, you would have created a net magnetic charge, which is a no-no. So you must have two universes for the price of one. The one you describe must be like ours, but the other should contain antimatter and have time running in reverse." I believe that Dr. Kramer is correct, and since you had Gene's account of the first, you should have mine of the second. It is gone now, so that when I stand before my mirror, I see only my own face. Or perhaps that second universe was ours, and it is we who are gone, leaving as our only trace these words upon a printed page.